Hello, faithful, and welcome to the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most objective 49ers discussion. Only smart takes and no clickbait. And with the preseason finally over, we can jump into my 53-man roster prediction. No preamble, so let's get right into it. Overall preseason thoughts, other than the injuries, which were aplenty. No huge takeaways, right? Everybody wanted to bash Nick Martin, his first preseason game against Denver. Then you saw the improvement against the Raiders. You saw even more improvement in his third preseason game. There's going to be ups and downs for everybody. Interceptions thrown in practice, who's getting beat at corner, who's dropping passes, pass protection, pass rush. So much different now than, 15, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when there was obviously, no social media. You didn't have people at practices every day reporting everything, reporting completions, attempts, passes, interceptions, missed blocks, everything that goes into, what the social media age brings, and having teams open up their training camps, which has been going on for decades anyway. But fans, content creators taking a more active role in what is happening. So everybody's on the pulse. Each practice is a day-to-day affair, or the productivity of quarterbacks and receivers and all players is a day-to-day affair. Hot one day, cold the next, neutral the next, back to hot. It's a roller coaster. And as long as you're able to keep your head even keel, you'll understand that a lot of the training camp heroes are just that. They're going to be on the team for training camp, for preseason games to fill out the 90-man roster. We saw a lot of churn at the bottom of the roster due to injuries, especially at running back and wide receiver. We also saw trades, obviously, right? This past week, Sky Moore coming over from the Chiefs. Today, Sunday, the Brian Robinson trade from the Commanders was officially announced. It was a conditional 6th round pick, so we'll see what that actually means based on Robinson's playing time and productivity. But the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch had words, about it as well. I mean, it's not like they could fight it. Admitting the fact that there was more of an issue with training camp again this year with injuries. And who knows if it has to do with the less contact, the less days. There is something to be said for building a callus, I would assume, right, with your bodies. The more contact, toughening up, especially the soft tissues. There was stretching questions coming out that the Niners don't stretch as much. And depending on what content creator or media member you talk through, that is an issue or maybe is not an issue, depending on one, practice someone might have seen. So much goes into it. All we know is it's a violent sport. Anybody can get hurt on any given play. Any one of us can get hurt walking up or down the stairs or off a curb. So it's not just the Niners, the Bills and other teams. The Lions were beset by a bunch of injuries in training camp, but by far, in terms of the number of players out, San Francisco in the last joint practice with the Raiders only had I think 25 people missing. So they only had, 65, and now 65 is a lot compared to a 53-man roster, but not even everybody there was, completely healthy practicing. And I don't think anyone's completely healthy now, unless they're, maybe someone like a Juwan Jennings, who I know has a calf, but that's, better than the alternative of being significantly banged up, broken arms, landing on IR, dislocated shoulders, etc. So nothing huge in terms of the takeaway. If we want to say that the defense looks better under Robert Saleh than Nick Sorensen, okay. But again, it's preseason. We did see a little bit more variety in terms of blitzing. But again, it was preseason. I think Sorensen, I remember Fred Warner last training camp saying that he's excited about some of the wrinkles Nick Sorensen was going to throw into the defense. I guess all those wrinkles were ironed out before week 1 because there were no wrinkles whatsoever. It was a cleanly pressed vanilla defense, rush 4, drop 7, which I know is the philosophy of the cover 3 and the wide 9, what Saleh is going to want to do. But I think he's obviously going to send more pressure at the quarterback, especially if he has faith in Demo and Green and Upton Stout or Chase Lucas, whoever it may be, and their safeties on the back end. But a big takeaway for me, now let's jump into the roster. The third quarterback play was so bad that there is absolutely no need for the Niners to carry 3 on the roster. So it's going to be Brock Purdy and Mac Jones. Carter Bradley, a quasi-nepotism signing. Tanner Mordecai signed, released for Nate Sudfeld, who came into a practice earlier this week, got cut the next day. Apparently, he hurt his arm, but maybe he's just Nate Sudfeld and he sucks, and they realized that after a year. Mordecai and Bradley basically split the reps. Both of them got banged up. What else is new? With leg injuries during the game, but with questions in other areas of the roster, especially at receiver, where there's been the most churn. Having only 2 quarterbacks on the 53, saving that extra spot for another position is going to be critical. But I think Tanner Mordecai, there should be 1 quarterback on the practice squad. It should not be Carter Bradley. It should be Tanner Mordecai. Now at running back, the addition of Brian Robinson from Washington makes the room clear, to me anyway. McCaffrey, Robinson, Guerendo, who banged up his shoulder in the last preseason game against the Chargers, and Jordan James, the rookie out of Oregon. So before the trade, I thought it would be McCaffrey, Guerendo, James, and Jeff Wilson. I'm a Jeff Wilson fan, did a lot of good things during his first stint here. Had some good moments at the Dolphins, was banged up a bit, brought back, and I think he is a candidate for the practice squad. Either Jeff Wilson or Keyshawn Vaughn, 1 running back. I think there's a world where maybe both could end up on the practice squad, except that they're both veterans, so that eats into the max of 6 players with more than 2 years of accrued NFL experience. But what was very interesting during the press conference after the Charger game last night was Kyle Shanahan coming out and saying, we brought Brian Robinson here to be RB2. So I don't know if that means he walks into the building as McCaffrey's backup for week 1 at Seattle, or he eventually gets there. And hell, I don't know what happens with Isaac Guerendo just in terms of the shoulder injury. And he went back into that game. He heard it, for those of you that watched the game, he hurt himself on a kick return coverage unit, but was able to shake it off. Maybe it was a stinger or whatnot, but it was the same shoulder that kept him out of multiple weeks of action in training camp. I mean, is there the outside possibility that he ends up on short-term IR to get the shoulder healed and Jeff Wilson becomes one of the 4 running backs? Sure, but I haven't heard anything. Granted, today's Sunday, and Kyle probably won't be speaking with the media again until Monday, although there's going to be another practice on Monday before they start releasing players, and then they have to get down to 53 by 1 o'clock Pacific time, 4 o'clock Eastern. So McCaffrey, Robinson, Guerendo, and James, and hopefully James, coming off of the fractured finger, is going to be healthy enough to be active at Seattle, especially if Guerendo's banged up. Otherwise, you have an elevation in Jeff Wilson to be the 4th running back, which isn't out of the realm of possibility. Juice at fullback. Moving on, tight end. So this is a position where the Niners could take all 4 tight ends on the roster. George Kittle, Luke Farrell, and Jake Tonjes. Braden Willis hurt his neck, apparently, in last night's game against the Chargers. To me, I'm going to say in a very dickhead way that's fortunate, because I only have 3 tight ends making the roster. I think there's additional needs elsewhere. I think someone like a Braden Willis, remember they released Mason Pline earlier in the offseason, they can bring in a tight end on the practice squad. I'm not sure if all 4 would be active on game day. You can make the argument that, maybe you should have 4 tight ends active on game day with the litany of injuries at receiver, and run the ball more, have more 2 tight end sets, maybe in 3 tight end sets, to take some of the pressure off of Purdy in the passing game. But I don't see that much with Braden Willis. I think Braden Willis could be, and he may not be on the roster in 2 years, but Kyle Juszczyk's heir apparent. And Jake Tonjes has been playing some backup fullback as well. I think he has the upper hand over Braden Willis making the team even before Willis had the neck injury. It's just a matter of, are they going to carry 3 or 4? I would prefer them to carry 3. This is, again, N of 1 preference. But the 49ers very well may carry 4. As we go through the other positions, you'll see why I docked a tight end. Offensive line. I have them with 9. Let's just go through the starters. Trent Williams, Ben Barch, Jake Brendel, Dominic Pooney, if he's healthy for week 1 at Seattle with the knee, and Colton McKivitz, leaving 4 backup spots. And if you've been listening to the podcast the past couple of weeks, I went over the fact that I'm still on the thought of Kyle carrying 2 backup tackles. So Spencer Burford has been backing up Trent Williams, and Austin Pleasance has been backing up Colton McKivitz. I think those 2 make the team. Someone like a Nick Sakiel, I think, has an ability to make the team because he can play both guard spots. He can play center. He's gotten some decent looks at center in training camp. But I'm going to go with Matt Hennessy, who the 49ers signed from the Falcons practice squad last season, signed him to a 2-year deal. Nick Sakiel, Matt Hennessy is like flipping a coin, right? All I know is I've seen Nick Sakiel for 3 years plus this training camp, and he's nothing more than a backup. And again, that's okay. There's starters and backups. There's no shame in that. But Hennessy provides the same kind of value as Nick Sakiel, still has all 3 interior spot flexibility, but is more seasoned as a center. And if anything happens to Jake Brendel, I'd rather have the more seasoned center there than someone like Nick Sakiel, even though Sakiel's been in the system longer, than Hennessy. And then now it comes down to the last spot, and I'm going to give it to 7th round draft pick Connor Colby, who could start at right guard week 1 for Dominic Pooney if Pooney's unable to go. So that means, Nick Sakiel released Drew Moss. A lot of people are high on him, as am I, but this is a numbers game, and I don't think the Niners are going to take 10 linemen. It's going to be 9. Michael Dunn recently signed formerly of the Cleveland Browns, who can play guard and tackle. Isaiah Prince, Isaac Alarcon, and Drake Nugent. Of those players, I think 2 of, if not all 3 of Nick Sakiel, Drew Moss, and Michael Dunn can make the practice squad. Drake Nugent has the outside possibility just because he's going into his 2nd season, has no accrued time with an NFL team. So he could be one of the 10 younger player spots on the practice squad. But between Sakiel, Moss, and Dunn, I think, you have a rookie in Moss and you have 2 veterans. I think that it doesn't provide added flexibility or anything, but additional depth should anybody along the offensive line get hurt. And Spencer Burford, as I've mentioned previously, has played a lot of guard in the NFL, has played tackle in college, is being groomed for the, I don't know if it's necessarily swing tackle or primarily backup left tackle behind Trent Williams, but he can kick inside if needed as well. So moving on to receiver. So we know Ayuk's on PUP. He's out until at least October. Demarcus Robinson has been suspended for 3 games. It's being appealed. Let's just assume he's done for 3 games. Jacob Cowing pulled his hamstring. Kyle said in the post-game presser after the Charger game that they're looking at 6 weeks. He's going to be placed on IR. Whether it's IR to return or not, there's no reason to eat up a roster spot with Jacob Cowing, so he's gone. So my 5 receivers for week 1 are going to be, now let's assume Juwan Jennings is healthy. Kyle anticipates him to be for week 1, but Jennings has not practiced in weeks. I don't know what we're expecting out of him. We should, if he is healthy and it's not really the calf and it's the contract, we should expect a slow start from Jennings, just like we did from Brandon Ayuk, who is the superior athlete coming off of his contract stalemate last offseason. Juwan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall, Russell Gage, who a week ago sprained his knee. They said 7 to 10 days, let's say 14 days just to be safe. Shown the most out of the veteran receivers, and I think he adds inside-outside flexibility. Sky Moore, recently acquired from the Chiefs, and Jordan Watkins, who is still battling an ankle injury, and we're 2 weeks out from the Seahawk game. Not sure if he's going to be available or active, but I think regardless, I think Watkins will be inactivated for the Seahawk game, and they will call up someone like a Robbie Chosen or an Isaiah Hodgins, a veteran, to play on the road in Seattle, where the snap count's probably going to be an issue. What is it? Lumen Field or whatever it's called is going to be loud for week 1 because Seattle, the fans don't realize that Seattle's not going to be very good yet. So they're going to be into it in the first half of the season. There could be a world where Robbie Chosen or Isaiah Hodgins makes the team. I don't know if I would take 6 wide receivers given what else I have going on prediction wise on defense. But Robbie Chosen, I don't think has shown enough that another team's like, I got to get Robbie Chosen on my active 53-man roster. Is it possible? Sure. But I think it's more likely that he and or Hodgins ends up on the practice squad and either one of those players gets called up for week 1. Something that's very weird that I want to just throw out there. I feel like at the beginning of the season, it's fortunate that the 49ers, in a weird sort of way, fortunate that they have injuries to Jacob Cowing and Jordan Watkins. Why? Because they're going to be replaced by a Russell Gage and a Robbie Chosen or Isaiah Hodgins, veteran receivers, during a stretch where the Niners are on the road for 2 of their first 4, division games 2 of their first 3, and they don't have to go through growing pains of a Jordan Watkins or a who the hell knows what Jacob Cowing is going to be in an environment like Seattle, in an environment like New Orleans. We know they're going to be a bad team, but the Superdome is going to be loud and rocking. And then they come home for Arizona and Jacksonville. So with Ayuk being hurt, with Robinson being suspended, I think the Niners, I hate to say lucked into having their two of their younger receivers hurt, which might not have been big parts of game plans anyway, or potential liabilities in game plans, to get replaced with veteran receivers like a Gage, a Chosen, or a Hodgins, and then bringing in Sky Moore, who's ultimately the Jacob Cowing replacement anyway, but he has, let's say, 2 years of NFL experience because he was hurt for most of last season and on IR. So he'll fill in at punt return. He'll do the gadget plays. He's been in the NFL for 2 years. He's got, I think, low 40s in total catches, which is 40 more than Jacob Cowing has in his 1-year career. So there's more experience at the wide receiver position now than there was at the beginning of training camp. Injuries suck, and that's how we had to get there. But I think it'll benefit the Niners earlier in the season to have a more seasoned veteran wide receiver room than what they had breaking or starting camp in July. We know who the specialists are. It's going to be Moody, guys, and it might be Moody all season unless he has an absolute train wreck stretch. Weeks at long snapper, Morstead at punter. That's fine. So now let's transition to defense. And defensive line, I've been going back and forth between 9 and 10 players, and I settled on 10. I want the balance of 5 D tackles and 5 D ends. So I'm going to go with, at defensive end, Nick Bosa, Mykel Williams, Bryce Huff, Sam O, and Robert Beal. And at defensive tackle, Jordan Elliott, Alfred Collins, CJ West, Kalia Davis, and Evan Anderson. Yetur Gross-Matos is going to start the season on PUP. He'll be able to join the team back in October, probably take Robert Beal's spot. Now, the last spot on the roster to me was either Evan Anderson or Sebastian Valdez. Anderson gets the nod for experience. I know Valdez looked good throughout the preseason. He could fall under the training camp hero moniker that I like to throw around there, but I want him to stay around. And again, he's a player, guys, that fans overvalue their own. And he looked decent. He looked okay. Wasn't dominant. And we're not expecting undrafted rookie free agents, really rookies in preseason and training camp, to look dominant. But I would love to keep him on the practice squad at D tackle, along with Shackle Brown. And in terms of defensive ends, let's keep Jalen Allen. Let's keep William Bradley King. Let's keep Trevis Gibson. The first 4 of those, everyone but Trevis Gibson is either a rookie or only 1 year of NFL experience, if that. So they'll fall into that. You could have 10 of those younger players on the practice squad, and you're getting a couple D tackles. You're getting, a handful of DNs, 3 DNs to work with there. And you may not need to dip into that pool at D tackle or D end because of the numbers that you have on the roster already, right? 5 and 5. I don't know how many are going to be active on game days. So you're going down from 53 to 46, right? So they have to make 7 inactives, and it could be one. It's definitely going to be one O lineman. It could be a running back if Jordan James isn't ready. It could be Jordan Watkins at wide receiver. So, probably a linebacker, a corner. They may only have 8 defensive linemen active for week 1 at Seattle, but I originally thought 5-5 D end and D tackle, strength in numbers. Again, even though all 10 are not going to be active, at least for week 1 or most games, I think this provides them with a decent amount of depth and still some young bodies on the practice squad that could be called up if needed. Linebacker, I really, really, really wanted to give the Niners 5 linebackers because I feel like it's a position that even though you're helping out on special teams as well, you have players that have played with the team previously that could end up on the practice squad and get called up and not really miss, a beat. I'm not saying that linebacker isn't complex. There's a lot of responsibility in that lot that goes on, but I think there just was the potential for more of a seamless transition for someone, let's say like a Jalen Graham, who is not going to make the team. But I went with 6 because that's what the Niners have done in previous seasons. So Fred Warner, D. Winters, Nick Martin, Tatum Bethune, Luke Gifford, and Curtis Robinson. So that means Trevis Gibson, Jalen Graham, and Chaz Surratt and Stone Blanton are cut. I could see, a Jalen Graham and maybe a Chaz Surratt, one younger, one more experienced player making the practice squad. But, Robinson, and it's not because he had that pick 6 on defense. I mean, that didn't hurt, of course. I think, obviously your locks to make the team were Warner, D. Winters, and Nick Martin. I think Tatum Bethune showed out well, a lot of promise. So he was number 4. Luke Gifford was brought in for special teams and does have some starting experience. He's number 5. And Robinson, coming off of the ACL, you had to feel good for him with that pick 6 that essentially clinched the game against the Chargers. Been in the system, right? If Nick Martin was never drafted, he could have been, as the season progressed, maybe battling for that 3rd linebacker spot potentially. But this is a position where I think the Niners, obviously you have your star and Fred Warner, then you have a lot of question marks. Like, I don't want to hear anything about D. Winters is going to be a dog. Who knows? He's got to stay healthy first, right? Nick Martin up and down in the preseason, trending, and someone's drafted in the 3rd round. You're projecting them, to be a starter at some point, if not on day 1. It's probably not going to be on day 1. And Tatum Bethune, a 7th round draft pick, a bit undersized, but a player just with football instincts. There's numbers here. There's talent here. There's youth here, but also a nice mix of youth and some veterans with Warner, Gifford, and Robinson. At cornerback, the Niners very well may take 5. I would say no, take 6. So Demo and Renardo Green and Upton Stout are going to make the team. I'm not sure Upton Stout starts week 1. He's missed a lot of time, and Chase Lucas has played very well in his absence. So Lucas would be, we'll just say cornerback number 4. This isn't a pecking order. Dallas Flowers has been one of the backups on the outside and showed out really well in training camp. He's going to make the team. Those would have been your 5. But then when I'm looking at that, you really only have 3 outside cornerbacks on the team in Demo, Green, and Flowers. And if one of those 3 players gets hurt, you're not putting an Upton Stout outside. I don't think you're putting a Chase Lucas outside. He's a bit undersized. So I would want 6 cornerbacks. I would want 2 at every position, right? A starter and a backup on the left side outside, starter and a backup right side outside, and 2 that could play corner, although you ultimately have 3 with Demo. So Darrell Luter makes the team. Jacob Robinson was tracking towards the practice squad, broke his forearm, so he's going to be placed on IR. Trey Brown earlier in the week or end of last week, coming over from the Seahawks, is placed on IR. That leaves just Fabian Moreau really as the only other cornerback getting cut, who could be one of the veterans that finds his way onto the practice squad. There's the real possibility the Niners go 5 cornerbacks because of what I'm going to talk about next at safety. But in a passing league, in a press corner type situation, if Saleh is going to bring some heat, you want your outside corners to have some size and have some length, which Flowers and Luter do have. They may not be starting caliber receivers. Well, Dallas Flowers was with the Colts before rupturing his Achilles. Looks to be all the way back, but I think this rounds out in terms of the starters having adequate depth, the outside corners, and the nickelback having adequate depth as well. And of course, Demo is the chess piece that you can really move anywhere. But if the Niners were to go 5 cornerbacks, here's why. 4 safeties on the roster. Jason Pinnock, Jair Brown, Marquez Siegel, and it's either going to be Brown or Siegel who's going to start next to Pinnock. It very well might be Siegel based on his preseason. And the 4th corner is going to be Siran Neal. He's played more, a 4th safety rather. He's played more corner than safety. So if he winds up being your hybrid safety / cornerback, and he was brought in specifically for special teams, and special teams coach Brant Boyer said Siran Neal is an all-pro caliber talent on special teams. They are not going to let him go. And wherever they line him up or denote him on the roster, and on the roster, he's a corner. When the first official depth chart comes out, and I'm anticipating him making the team, I'm curious if they put him at safety or cornerback. But again, if Siran Neal is on the team, then there might only be 5 corners because he's a bigger corner. He's 6 feet. He's not a 5'8", 5'9", 5'10", like an Upton style Demo or Chase Lucas. And he's, he gives you that 2-for-1 flexibility. And if that happens, maybe then that's where the 4th tight end is put on the 53-man roster, whether it's Braden Willis or not. And if whatever neck ailment he has, he still has obviously 2 weeks to get healthy, which means obviously Malik Mustafa is on the PUP list. We know he's not going to be ready, or chances are he's not going to be ready until October. Jalen Mahoney, Derek Canteen, and Richie Grant got released. I envision either Mahoney or Canteen or both on the practice squad. So we are now officially 2 weeks away from week 1 at Seattle, 4:05 Eastern start. A lot is going to happen between now and then. This is my prediction for the 53-man roster going into week 1, not my prediction for what the 53-man roster looks like anytime on Tuesday after 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 o'clock Eastern, when all teams have to make final cuts, because there's going to be some movement, right? There's going to be people that they may need to keep on the roster, like a Jacob Cowing, to put him on IR. And then they, bring Russell Gage in or sign him. Tell veterans or certain players, hey, stick around, guys. You're not going anywhere. We just need to manipulate the roster a little bit before you end up on the 53 or end up on the practice squad. So, and is there the possibility that an outside player cut from another team makes the 53? Sure. I can't project that, right? Like, that's impossible to know just based on the 90 players, the 90-man roster that the Niners had in camp. Here's how I would trim away, I guess it's 37, if I'm doing my math correctly, to get to 53. Now, is there work to be done? I guess so, right? Because at receiver, you're going to have Demarcus Robinson coming back after week 3. You're going to have Brandon Ayuk coming back after week, say, 5 or 6 or 7, and they're going to have to release somebody somewhere. So just like any team, whatever this initial 53-man roster looks like is not going to be obviously the set in stone roster for the season. There's going to be injuries. People are going to be shuttling in and out. There's going to be elevations from the practice squad. And as I'm predicting now on August 24th, I think a Robbie Chosen or an Isaiah Hodgins will make the practice squad. And one of them very well may make the 53-man roster. Again, how bad is Jordan Watkins' ankle? Does he start out on IR? And you have yet another veteran on the 53? I don't know. But a lot is going to happen this upcoming week. I know we're all excited for final cuts, and there's going to be a huge fervor over, player X was released from this team. The Niners should sign him and release this person, that person, etc. Waivers, claiming players, still, a certain hierarchy that needs to happen before we know any of that. But I'm fairly confident in this 53. Am I going to get all 53 right? Absolutely not. If I can get somewhere between 48 or 50 and upright, I'd be very happy, because there are question marks, again, at tight end, on the O-line, on the D-line. How many do you carry? How many are they carrying at cornerback? So We will see, and we will all find out together essentially a day and a half from now. So that's going to conclude the podcast for today. Like always, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to make us part of your listening and watching routine. The preseason is over. Decisions still need to be made, but we are steamrolling towards week 1. Hated divisional matchup up in Seattle. At least it's a 1:00 game and not a 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 night game to start the season. And we'll see what Brock Purdy and whatever his offense, line, and skill position players are going to look like. But there will be plenty to discuss between now and then, whatever you are doing between now and when we talk again sometime this upcoming week. Stay happy, healthy, and safe. We'll talk soon. Take care, everybody.